I feel like it's almost framed as like an ahistorical view to say that there were many socialists that respected liberal traditions, and it's absolutely not the case. You can just look at all the socialists that took power and what they did with it.
It's not ahistorical to say that the positive example.
Whoa, hey. If you want to go to, look what the socialists did with all the power. Ooh, I'm not sure if that's the avenue you want to go there. Okay?
Examples that you're bringing forth socialism were all socialist parties that existed in liberal countries where the countries maintained being liberal countries, and all the negative examples of socialism are socialists taking over and making the country entirely social. That's not an ahistorical position to have.
But
that's a completely fact.
Yeah,
Sitch, you can't say entirely socialist because what you're necessarily sneaking in.
Right. You're conflating socialist parties with socialist governments, okay? You're not talking about, okay, the socialist parties that have taken office and then turned the country socialist versus the socialist parties that have entered the government, but then the government continued to function as a liberal democracy afterwards, right? Like, you're not talking about that. You're conflating the two because you're doing a dishonest framework in order to benefit your own points. You're basically pointing at all the people who are socialist parties who took charge of liberal governments, and then after they left, they remained liberal. But you're not talking about any, but none of that, almost none of that, if any, are like socialist parties that took charge of a liberal government, and then afterwards they made it socialist and it worked out fine. Because most socialist parties that take control over liberal democracies or anything of that sort before just ends up being like fucking dictators. So, you know, whatever.
Is the idea that socialism is necessarily in opposition to liberalism, which you've already agreed in this conversation. No, these things can coexist. And so when you keep saying,
I didn't say that.
Okay, Sitch, you literally said earlier in this conversation that yes, liberalism and socialism, you know, in theory you could have social ownership and also liberal political institutions.
I said you can have some social ownership in a liberal system. That doesn't mean that socialism and liberalism
Keep it up, guys. Fire is literally so mad right now. It's funny.
Are completely that they are compatible, or what you said that they're not incompatible.
Well,
because socialism is inherently, if you actually follow the philosophy, is inherently anti-liberalism and is not compatible.
So Sitch, okay, freedom of speech, freedom of press, equality under the law, you know, your ability to politically organize and advocate for yourself. And let's just say we live in a world. Let's just say that we live in a world.
No, Adam, bunch of rights that are completely immaterial to the means of production.
Immaterial? No, it's no. Okay, Adam.
Look,
you're so close. No, Adam, you're so close. You're so close, Adam. Adam, you're so close. It's immaterial to the means of production, which is to say you can have.
Make him angrier. He'll be funny.
All of those liberal rights
except
with
the right
social
to
ownership.
Own a productive business. That's the individual right that you can't have.
So Adam. Now we're shifting the discussion, but I would just, and I'm perfectly willing to answer that point.
I'm just trying to focus the discussion on the discussion we're actually having here instead of going off on, you can still speak freely, you just can't own a business.
Right, so you can still, every single one of the rights guaranteed to you under like the fucking U.S. Constitution is still able to be guaranteed to you in like in a world with complete social ownership, except like you said, in an ideal sense, you wouldn't be able to have privately owned businesses unless they were sole proprietorships, which I assume you're not.
And does that impinge on people's individual rights? So
the question would be, does a social ownership paradigm enforce your ability to access other rights to a greater degree than is the value
of... Oh my God, this is the best dodge ever.
No, what are you talking about? So, for instance, right?
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Adam, does tax money prevent your ability to individually freely associate when you charge taxes?
No, of course not.
Really? So when the government takes half your money, you're not able to keep half your money anymore? That's not infringing on your rights. You earned that money, right?
You can have collective ownership of institutions. I'm not against that. I don't think Sitch is against that. But in a socialist paradigm, you're trying to make that illegal.
Adam, if the government charged a 100% tax rate, do you think that would be an anti-liberal policy?
Yes.
Okay, so perfect, right? We would necessarily be anti-liberal in the sense that we're not allowing you to keep your income anymore. That's one way in which our society is not like liberal in the individual rights sense, because you're not allowed to keep your income anymore. Now you said, hey, if we charge 70% taxes, I said 50% as an example. If we charge 50% taxes, that wouldn't necessarily be anti-liberal because we're what do you call it?
Illiberal, but
okay. So is it 30%? What's the amount of taxes the government can charge before it's not anti-liberal anymore? Are you allowed to keep 99% of your income?
I'll go 10%. Sitch.
Okay, so we don't live in a liberal society because we charge way more than that's in one way America is failing to live up to its liberal ideals.
We live in socialist America right now.
Right. I mean, you see how incoherent this is. My point is that I think that an argument
not incoherent. At least we're having.
It's
at least
totally
we're talking
coherent.
About something of substance here.
So, for instance, when I take taxes as an example, right, that a lot of Democrats would argue that taxes are pro-freedom. Part of the reason they would argue that is because with tax revenue, we can guarantee...
All ended up in the dodging of the question.
It's not dodging the question, Adam. You're just fucking incapable of listening to more than one sentence. Go flip on fucking Instagram reels if you fucking attention span can't handle it. Okay.
You never answered the question.
Okay.
I'm not the one dodging. You're the one
okay.
dodging. I don't know why you're.
Okay, Adam.
Well, actually, I understand why you're getting upset because I keep bringing up the question that you don't want to answer. So
you keep interrupting my explanation, Adam. Do you want me to give you an explanation? Like, I understand it's more than one sentence. I understand the attention span might be limited, okay? But give me a second here, okay? I'm using taxes as an example because it's considered to be a pretty ordinary argument to say, hey, by using tax revenue to pay for things like Medicare, that we're enhancing the freedom of the elderly because the elderly living in poverty and being unable to access medical care in some sense makes them unfree.
So I'm trying to understand if Econoboi is okay with the democracy, acknowledges that socialism will never be 100% practicality, and why even call yourself a socialist? Exactly. You're with us, okay? You're fucking with us, okay? I think he would say he's a socialist because he reads a bunch of socialist books and theories, and then he says that, oh yeah, it aligns with his values the most. But then it's like... But then it's so retarded. It's like, oh, like if your ideal is Star Trek communism, then why not call yourself a communist? The fuck? Yeah, I recognize that, you know, Star Trek is communist, and I recognize that Star Trek communism is better than everything we have right now, but I wouldn't call myself a fucking communist, right? Does that make sense, guys? Like your ideal utopia is socialist or communist or whatever the fuck, right? But what's the practicality in calling that yourself now in public other than to hold water for tinkies, right? That's the entire point of what I'm trying to talk about the entire fucking time. It's so fucking stupid, right? Because yeah, like obviously I love Star Trek, right? And I recognize that what they have is essentially a communist utopia, right? A militarized communist utopia, just FYI, all right? But then at the same time, you know, I don't think anyone who says that, yeah, you know what, Star Trek communist utopia is like that in the first place. Like, I don't think that you would say, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna call myself a communist because that's what I want to aim for in Star Trek. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. It's a fucking utopia. That's what it is. Okay, fuck me.
Because even though they have equality under the law, they're not able to meaningfully access those rights because they're poor and.
So yeah, this is why I think that fire is holding water for like tinkies, right? Because there's no other point to calling you a socialist, calling yourself a socialist if that's like the utopia that you want to go for. Because at this point, then yeah, I mean, other tinkies are just gonna call out that label for their fucking extremist beliefs. So yeah, you are actually being a useful idiot. You're a fucking moron. Do you think capitalism is eternal? Like capitalism will have no succeeding system? I don't fucking know. I have no answer for that. All right, fuck. But like obviously, I think that whatever we have in Star Trek would be better. But in Star Trek, you know, they have replicators. Like what the fuck? They can literally infinitely produce every single type of food ever. No one would ever starve. And they in the holodeck, they can produce every single fucking material out of nothing, out of pure fucking energy. It's crazy. So yeah, of course it's like completely different environment. Of course it's like a utopia because they don't take into account the cost that goes into making replicator material or anything of the sort, right? Fuck, of course. So it's like it's a complete non question. The question itself makes no fucking sense, right? Anyway.
They're unfree because they can't have their healthcare that they need, right? And so similarly, in a socialist framework, you could make a very similar argument that by distributing the gains of wealth and gains of society collectively.
Do you think we should be playing for the end of capitalism or theorizing system past that? I think that's incredibly gay and retarded, okay? Maybe we should focus on taking individual steps that improve people's lives incrementally or even by a lot, right? When we're talking about things like Obamacare, right? Where it put millions of Americans on healthcare, right? That's improving lives by a lot, right? We should talk about incrementalism like that instead of saying, yeah, we're going to burn down the entire system because it just leads to completely useless dialogue that leads to absolutely no fucking increment, like it leads to no fucking good things whatsoever. So yeah, like of course. Anyway,
instead of individually, we can use all of those fruits and we can use all of these different distributed dynamics of, you know, essentially equitable wealth ownership to enhance people's liberal freedoms, that people are more able to access their democracy and they're more able to access their means of subsistence in a world with socially owned production than with individually owned production. Now you can say, the last thing I was going to say, you can say every day of the week that that's impractical, that's stupid, that, oh, that's not actually how that would work.
Do you see this? Twin bow of anger. In Path of Exile 2, that's me towards you, okay? Twin bow of anger, okay? I'm anger.
Work out. Okay, fair enough. But to say that it's necessarily incompatible, that it's necessarily the case, but it's not though, Adam. Why would that?
You're denying people the right to own a business. You're saying, look, these businesses will be done by the government and that will be better. That will actually increase your individual rights over time, but you're still denying people the individual right to own a productive business. And
Adam, let's say that I'm actually wrong and my society that I advocate for is actually
you're wrong.
Actually 20 times better than I could have even imagined. Let's say that we collectivize the entire means of production. And because we did that, the median person is 20 times richer than they are today. Okay, 20 times richer. And we have like some radical level of equality or something like that.
Well, I mean, that's not happening, is it? Is Norway surpassing the United States in terms of fuck? Can Norway even surpass California? Can Norway even surpass a fucking can Norway even surpass Georgia or Alabama in terms of entrepreneurship? I don't even know the answer to that question.
Would you say that that is a society
That's how unsure I am.
that is more free on net or less free on net?
It's
California's what? The fourth. The fourth. Previously, they were the fifth, but they beat Japan. California beat Japan. California literally beat Japan like last year or some shit. It's crazy. It's insane how much like this one fucking state can accomplish.
obviously depends upon how you define.
And California has public health care. California also has public. They have CalCare. They have their own version of Obamacare that is better, right? And they're able to accomplish like human rights shit like that. So yeah, it's almost as if maybe socialism isn't the way. Maybe you can combine capitalism and you can combine like public options at the same time to create the perfect amalgamation of perfection. Okay, maybe you can actually have that. Okay, I'm sorry, is California a socialist state? Is it? No, it's probably one of the most capitalistic states out there ever. All right,
Freedom. You could set up a society where nobody can leave their.
and the culture isn't dead in California either. We have plenty of culture. Okay. We have a homelessness crisis, but that's minor, like small pebble shit compared to all the good that California has provided. California subsidizes diabetes and cancer in Midwestern states, okay?
Their homes, but they have all of their needs at their disposal.
Okay, so
And
who's
you could say,
dodging the
"Oh,
question
look,
now?
Those people
Adam,
are very.
Are those people that are living in a free society by every right that we've been talking about, except for individual ownership of the means of production, but they're 20 times richer? Do you think those people are living more free lives, or are they living less free lives in a world where they're 20 times poorer, but you have individual
less
ownership
free
of the
lives.
Okay, well then we
Because
just disagree.
they can't allocate those resources in the way that they prefer to allocate them.
I think, and
You're actually
okay.
infringing on their right to allocate that 20% more to doing productive means on their own.
Well, yeah,
so
I
therefore
think
they are less free.
Yeah, and so we have a different sense of things. I think that if somebody says, "Hey, Econoboi, you're not able to start a business, but I'll give you 20 times the amount of money that you have now, right? Like whatever that, I'm going to be worth $10 million or something like that." I would say I'm a lot more free because that $10 million allows me to basically choose not to work anymore. I can do anything I want with my free time. I can afford any healthcare that I need. I can travel anywhere that I want. I would consider myself to be more free if I had 20 times the money than if I had 20 times less money, but I could in theory start a business if I wanted. Now, that's just our different philosophical sense of things, but
Right. But
that's
you
a bedrock
admit
disagreement.
that you're infringing on someone's individual right to start a productive business. That's the ultimate question. It sounds like you have answered it. So.
Adam,
Well,
I've said 100 times in this conversation
Adam,
that my ideal society is the collective
Adam,
ownership of the means of production.
Adam,
Yes,
Okay.
you want to
I've
infringe on
never-
people's individual rights. Do you actually understand?
Yeah, and you it seems like you
how
happen
that
to think it
is
seems like
contradictory to the values of liberalism.
first of all, I don't think it's
Adam.
contradictory to the values of liberalism to say
Why?
that I've already explained why, Adam. Because I think that if
you
somebody
have-
has
because you have
20
all
times
these
the
other-
I think
right,
if
because you
somebody
have all
has
these
20
other abilities.
I think if somebody has 20
Adam.
times the amount of money,
Adam.
even if they
Adam.
can't start a business with that money, they are meaningfully more free than before.
Yeah,
and you
wait,
disagree with
you're,
that.
You're making but you're making my point here. Okay.
What point
This
am I?
is-
I'm not. I've agreed with I've agreed with Adam's framing, but I've just said I've pointed
the
out that
way
we have a
that
different
you're
sense of what
framing
freedom
this-
is.
The way that you're framing this is making my point about this difference, the inherent difference in the core philosophies of liberalism and socialism. Because, well, according to the little Google AI here, it says 75% of Americans earn less than $100,000 a year. Okay. So under your framework, you would say, well, we should take the majority of money from the top 25% of Americans to drop them down to 100K and give it to the 75% of Americans making under 100K. That way, everyone's more free. Okay, that's the framework that you're arguing for, and that's why I'm saying it's incompatible with liberalism and individual rights.
Okay, right, but Stitch, Stitch again. If the argument is basically that things like progressive taxation and things like public institutions of ownership and things like that are necessarily in opposition to people's individual freedoms, insofar as one of those individual freedoms
Progressive taxation
is
is not against individual freedoms.
Stitch, you just said distributing money from the top 25% to the bottom 75% would be against individual freedom, right?
Okay.
Now, you
I'm
just
sorry.
said that.
Let me
She's using
say
that
this
as a
very
analogy,
specifically
yeah.
again. Okay, 75% of Americans make under $100,000. You are saying that someone is, quote, more free. This is why you're saying it's not incompatible with liberalism. That someone is, quote, more free. The elderly are more free if you go and give them Social Security. And I'm saying under the way that you're framing this, you're conceptualizing this, you open the door for someone to say, I think we should take the majority of wealth, not progressive taxation. We should take everyone's money. We should make a cap so that no one in America makes over $100,000 so we can redistribute all that wealth to everyone else. Therefore, we've created more freedom in the country for that 75%. Therefore, it's more free. That is what you're advocating for through this philosophy that you're talking about.
Yeah, so I don't think that's exactly what I'm advocating for. Again, I wouldn't use these absolutist terms. What I'm advocating for is essentially the financial and business capital of the world, which is not all of wealth. I think that about, I don't know, something like half of wealth in society is basically businesses. The other half is, you know, not
the
not
principle
majorly
that
touched
you are
now.
laying out here. You understand it goes to exactly what I'm saying. And you frame this way.
Sitch, again,
This is
Hey,
why
Sitch,
I and so
are the
many people have a
25%
problem.
more free?
That's
What
why
about-
so many liberals
Sitch.
have a problem with socialism, because this is the kind of arguments that this is where it goes whenever you start making these
Sitch,
arguments.
I agree that a lot of liberals are very offended by the idea of collective ownership of the means of production, socialism in general. So I wouldn't disagree with that.
Look,
The only thing that I would
that's
say-
a complete
hold on.
mischaracterization. Yeah.
It's you framing that saying, well, giving more people more money gives them more freedom, so therefore that's a good and that's liberal. Liberalism is about equality to opportunity. It's not to equality of outcome.
No,
It's not
but
about
Sitch,
saying
you
everyone's
don't have
more
the same
free if everyone has more
opportunities if you
money.
have radically different levels of wealth and income. Obviously, you'd agree with that. You'd be a dumb fuck to disagree that obviously wealth and income make a big determining factor as a proportion of what opportunities people have.
Of course they do.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
okay, so of course they do. So if I could argue that under my system, people, because of the much more egalitarian distribution of wealth and income, have much more egalitarian opportunity, then you would at least be committed theoretically to saying that my system is better for people's.
And this conversation commits me to a fucking mental hospital. Holy shit. Talk about committing.
Liberty, because they have much more equality of opportunity, because wealth and income are a big determining factor of persons' opportunities.
If
right?
you listen, I'm in favor of increasing people's opportunity to school and education and, you know, food and all those good things. That's fine. That's great. Okay. I'm just saying it's interesting to me that your framework went directly to the socialist framework of this sort of conversation of, well, we'll just the more we redistribute things to everyone, the more free everyone makes.
No,
the
I was
more free
making
everyone becomes.
Sitch.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna try one last time. Okay.
Oh my
I am not a
God.
strict egalitarian. I don't believe
Oh
that literally
God.
anything is worth the squeeze when it comes to egalitarianism. Okay. I think that egalitarianism is really important. I would say that in general, you know, we should take egalitarianism and egalitarian goals like pretty seriously, but I wouldn't say that they're literally the only thing that matters or like the only thing that we should care about. I just think that they're one of the really important things that we should care about. Okay. So I wouldn't say that we should all be equally poor. I would say that we should take like people's basic absolute.
Just a reminder, that the USSR was always been highly anti-Semitic, okay? Highly anti-Semitic. Yes, they did recognize Israel at first, okay? Mainly because they thought they could turn Israel against the United States. But eventually they went against Israel, I think. But yeah, just FYI, okay? Stalin has been anti-Semitic. Marx he's Jewish, but he's like probably self-hating most likely. Who the fuck knows, okay? I'm just saying. All right, all of these people, all right, they're all okay with anti-Semitism as well, okay?
Standard of
But
living
okay.
pretty seriously, things like economic growth, utilitarianism, this kind of thing. Like we should take all that pretty seriously. Okay.
Do
But
you
I do-
agree that there should be some level of
Look, I'm just saying there's a reason why Jews don't feel safe living in Russia right now, okay? All right. Yeah.
inequality in society?
Yeah, I think that in a society there's always going to be some level of inequality for various reasons. And I'm not,
Mhm.
you know, obviously people are going to have different talents and different desires, and people have different understandings of what even they want to do. Like some people might just work half as much as other people, so they're probably going to have half as much
Right.
income, right? So
Okay.
that's true. I
good.
mean, but again, I just you know, the point though is that just because I take equality seriously doesn't mean that it's like the only thing that I care about. My only point is that I think that there's I guess like a min-max here that I think is very sensible to think about. That, yeah, I think that the current level of inequality in our society is not justifiable given the level of like economic growth that we see or the level of destitution that we see in society as well. That equality of opportunity is like not even close to being achieved because we have these radical inequalities of wealth and income in society that perpetuate each other. Which I don't know. I think most liberals would actually agree with that, and that's why most liberals support things like taxation and you know, some public institutions and public ownership, like Adam mentioned. Obviously, I just go all the way on it for an ideal, like kind of normative framework. But you know, along the way, it sounds like we're on the same train. It's just we would get off at different points, at different stops, basically.
Wow. Good meme.
Okay.
Nerd. Bitch.
I guess that's
Wow.
There was a
Loser.
question
Wow.
here. Some
Okay. All right, Chef Hot Talker jumps on.
Dev has joined the call, it looks like.
Hello, Dev.
Hello, hello.
connecting the audio. Hello, Dev.
I
Hello,
heard you, Dev. I don't know what happened.
Dev. Hello, Dev.
Yeah, I don't.
Hola.
Maybe I don't hear him actually.
Well, now I don't hear him. I don't know.
God damn it, Dev. Jesus
He's
Christ.
always doing this kind of stuff.
He's
Jacob Lloyd
always-
for $10 says, legitimate question. In this new system, does the public get to decide on what I do with my 7 sheep and 21 chickens? On what level do private decisions get to be made?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think most socialists have a sole proprietorship exception. So if you just wanted to own a bunch of sheeps or whatever at your house, or you wanted to have a stove where you bake cakes or whatever, I don't think most people would have a huge problem with that under a socialist framework.
Oh yeah, guys, just a reminder, okay? Donations, if you have not liked the stream, please like the stream, okay? But you can donate always via super chat, membership, etc., etc. Or you can donate via Streamlabs, okay? You can donate via all of these means of production. No, means of monetization, okay? Thank you guys so much for the support. I appreciate it, okay? Just FYI. All right, thank you. Okay, please, donate.
As soon as you
wouldn't-
hire someone to help you with your chickens, is that where the problem arises?
Again, I think in my practical system includes all the flexibility that you guys are describing. So you'd still be able to hire employees and have like private businesses if you wanted. I have a hard time conceiving of what exactly, like you said, that's one of those practical problems that I would fully recognize. That it's like, okay, you got like a guy who wants to, he wants to just hire some like day labor or something like that. It's like, is all of a sudden the government got to buy part of his farm or something like that? Like, I think all these practical problems are really worth thinking about, for sure. That's why I say that in my sort of practical incarnation of my system, there'd probably be limitations on how far you could push public ownership.
Mark Twain for $20 says, Econoboi, would you support removing residential construction from being applicable to the Davis-Bacon Act in order to make federal loans like HUD 221D more financially feasible, or are unions more important than
Aren't the farmers the first ones socialists and communists kill? I don't think that's true.
housing?
Oh my God, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know the exact regulation he's talking about. But I think it sounds like you're referring to the idea of union, like a lot of different contracting standards will require union labor or they'll incentivize union labor. I'm typically against those kind of things. I mean, I don't think the best way to incentivize unions is to basically give them favorable contracting standards. The best way to incentivize unions is just make it easy to form a union, which we don't do in this country, and we should do.
Someone asked, do you think the government should have used force to break up the Chaz and the Chop?
I don't know what are we talking about here? I don't know.
You know, remember during BLM, there were like these autonomous zones where Antifa far left people would like take over a couple blocks of the city and they'd say like, this is an autonomous zone of America. Do you think the government should have sent police in there to
That was
stop
so
all that,
gay.
reestablish order?
That was so
Probably
gay.
is that not? Do we have autonomous governments in this country? I guess is that what's
No.
currently?
So, okay, so good. So you say, yeah, get rid of those.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think obviously you should try to aim towards peaceful settlements, but if somebody's like, I don't like blockading the city or something and refuses to leave, I mean, you got to do something about it. So,
Gotcha.
Hi, by the way. What's going on?
Hello, Dev.
hey, Dev, what's
How's
up?
it going?
Ugh,
You guys
this guy.
have had quite the shit show. It's really fun to watch.
This is not a shit show. I don't know
What
what
is
you're talking
the
about.
shit show? What are you talking about?
It's been mostly.
It's just been a lot of
productive,
fun.
I
It's
would
been a lot
say.
of fun. I've enjoyed the stream.
I think
fun.
the conversation with Destiny and Connor Pisco was like 100 times more shit show than anything happened.
That's
here.
true. Yes, that's true. You guys
So
all
what
took
did
some
you wanna
Prozac today or
ask?
something?
What did
Oh,
you
so-
want? You kept
just-
pestering the. Come on.
I only pestered like twice.
I know. I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you.
I guess just real quick, since you guys were just talking about it, Econoboi, since you don't know about it, the Chaz was basically, I think it was like
Chaz
6
is
city
better if you
blocks
don't know.
in Seattle that some far left goons took over and declared independence from America for about a month. And the city government was like, "Oh, it's no big deal. You know, everyone's just this is a radical new experiment in how to run our society." And then after a month of this shit and like 5 people died, they finally cracked down on it. It was kind of an embarrassment, to be honest, for the Democrats back in 2020. I'm surprised you didn't know about it.
Lord.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always had views like when
True.
there's like that Colorado City like cult leader situation that happens where it's like they kind of
Is this true? Yes. It was literally, it made for really good content though. It was hella cringe, like incredibly cringe. Yeah.
took over an entire county and the government just kind of didn't do anything about it. It's like, why
Very
aren't we
cringe.
doing something about that? You know, that seems pretty crazy to me. So I don't know. I guess the government generally is like very scared of like Waco-like situations, which is understandable. That's why I said, you know, always try to, you know, do as peaceful a solution as possible. But, you know, if you have a situation where people are like, you know, abusing kids or something, you probably have to do something extreme at that point.
Yeah,
Okay,
no
so
idea.
just so I you know that I know what you're saying because I have read the Substack now. I read it twice actually at this point. So you're talking about sovereign wealth funds and publicly owned companies that buy up stocks in private companies And then basically through an incremental process, the government ends up owning, you said, between 60 and 80% of the means of production.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Okay. Firstly, why 60 to 80%? Like, why is that your goal?
I think that's just the realistic target that I could imagine working out decently well. We have about 75%.
No. What? I mean, if you have to model after social democracy. Okay, well, hold on. Okay, never mind. He's completely unserious, okay? Econoboi is completely unserious, all right? He's not serious about this shit. Okay, he doesn't give a fuck about any of this, all right? It's just vibes, okay?
Institutional ownership of the stock market right
Vibes.
now,
It's vibes. It's
and we don't
vibes.
seem to have
It's all
huge liquidity
vibes.
problems or allocative inefficiencies in the stock
Oh
market.
my
Insofar
God.
as we do have allocative inefficiencies, it's not because of the
It's
institutional
vibes.
investors at the
I
very
get
least.
it.
And so I figured,
I
if we essentially
understand.
took over that institutional management at about
get it.
75%, I think something like that could make sense. And then that's just a business capital, but obviously we would have a diverse portfolio of more than just that when it came
Again, his top example is Norway.
to wealth. And so that's the part of wealth that I guess I'm most concerned with. The allocative inefficiencies is the business
Okay,
capital.
dude.
So I think 75% of the stock market is probably, you could probably get
Okay.
up to that.
This basically sounds like BlackRock, Vanguard, etc., but publicly owned.
I'm sorry. Okay, but California is better than Norway, okay? Yes, that's right. The entire state is better. Okay, the entire state is better. All right, yes, it is. No. The entire state is better. Ah!
And
Yeah.
not client owned.
That's one
Okay.
way to think of it.
So you said there's going to be a whole bunch of public holding companies. Why would they compete against each other if they're all state owned?
This one state can defeat an entire country. Dude, Norway probably doesn't even have as high of a GDP as Japan, okay? Forget about that, all right? You're not even up to our level.